directed by Gareth Edwards, starring Aaron Taylor Johnson, Ken Watanabe, Elizabeth Olsen, and Bryan Cranston. This American reboot from Legendary Pictures in 2014 follows a soldier's attempt to reunite with his family as he's caught in the midst of a globe-trotting kaiju battle between a species of radioactive parasites and a legendary creature known as Godzilla.
This alpha predator of yours, Doctor, do you really think he has a chance?
The arrogance of man is thinking nature is in our control, and not the other way around.
You are not fooling anybody when you say that what happened was a natural disaster. You're lying. It was not an earthquake. It wasn't a typhoon. Because what's really happening is that you're hiding something out there. And it is going to send us back to the Stone Age.
Calling all podcasters. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a special bulletin, reporting live from the We Can Make This Work, probably podcast network. We are receiving reports of, well, what can only be described as a gigantic ape rampaging through the streets of New York City. Wait, this just in. According to our overseas correspondents, there's been a confirmed sighting of a massive reptilian creature off the coast of Japan. Oh, the humanity. If you have any information regarding these two Goliath monsters or their film franchises, please record on your dictaphone and post or telegraph your audio transmission to us at probablywork.com. Please, hurry. Time is running out. We've just been told that the mayor is evacuating the city and the president dispatching military forces. I don't know how to describe what I'm looking at, dear listeners. They appear to be squaring off. Oh, jeez. This is it, people. The battle of the century. It's Godzilla versus Kong. A fire-breathing lizard takes on the giant angry ape. In this, a no-holds-barred clash between the king of the monsters and the titan of Skull Island. Who will come out on top? Why are they fighting? How did that monkey get so big? Find out on the latest season of Podcasters Assemble, Kongzillathon.
Let them fight.
Podcasters, assemble!
This is Gabe Thomas from the Every Marvel Movie Ever and Every DC Movie Ever podcasts.
Greetings, this is Steve Whitcamp from Geek to Geek Media.
Hi, this is Justin Aki, graphic designer at One Half Significant Auto Co.
Hello, I'm Robert Kelly, host and writer of Record All Monsters.
Eric Slater here from Epic Fails of History and Too Young for This Trek.
This is Troidal Power from the Power Playthroughs podcast.
Hi, this is MC from the Best Animated Shows Ever so far.
I'm Stephen White. I'm the co-host of the Super Mega Crash Brothers Turbo podcast. I'm here to talk about Godzilla from 2014.
These are my thoughts on 2014's Godzilla.
And today I'm going to be talking about Godzilla 2014.
And I'm here to talk to you about the 2014 American version of Godzilla.
I think this is a great movie, though my wife hated it.
I had never seen this movie before this podcast.
Godzilla 2014 is probably on the top of the list when it comes to movies I constantly tell myself I'll rewatch, and I just never have.
This is a movie that I've seen quite a few times since its release in 2014.
When the announcement came that Legendary was taking a crack at Godzilla for the US again, I got excited.
So, as great as this movie is, I actually think the trailer is even better.
Very much in the same way I got excited 15 years prior to the idea of Godzilla coming stateside.
The first mistake people make with this movie is that they come to watch Bryan Cranston, as this came out the summer Breaking Bad ended.
All I knew about it was that this was Bryan Cranston's Godzilla movie.
I always think of him as the dad from Malcolm in the Middle, as I had never, and still haven't ever, broken a single bed.
Then Bryan Cranston was added as the big star attached to the project, and that kind of elevated it a little bit more for me. Because remember, this was when he was riding high off his big success on Breaking Bad. So he was a hot commodity, and he didn't disappoint here.
I saw it for the first time around when it came out, and as you can probably tell by my voice, I'm pretty young, so I was even younger when I saw the movie. I was probably in elementary school.
This remake/reboot claimed to be more faithful, but I still questioned how faithful it would be based on prior experiences.
I've actually seen this movie now about 3 times, but honestly, this is the first time I've actually paid attention to it.
When I first saw it, I didn't really enjoy it.
Now, that's not to say that this movie isn't great. It just so happens that the trailers for this movie are some of the best trailers ever made.
So before you watch it, drop that expectation from your mind.
Then that teaser trailer got leaked. 2012 San Diego Comic-Con. Remember when we used to be able to go to those? I didn't get to go, but thanks to the internet, the trailer was leaked online and it blew me away. The overall tone was somber, which felt more in line with the original. Then that reveal, even though we only see a silhouette, it was enough. And the roar was so different yet so familiar, I was immediately hyped for this film.
And I think I was vaguely aware of it being in San Francisco just because the trailers, I'm pretty sure showed Godzilla approaching the Golden Gate Bridge. But that was all I knew going in.
The first time I saw this film might have been in 2015 or 16 when it first came out on Netflix.
The first time I saw it was in the IMAX 3D format, which was a very memorable experience.
I watched the film for the first time in an IMAX theater in 3D because I wanted that full experience.
Really enjoyed the 3D. I think it added to the already impressive sense of scale that Gareth Edwards brings so well to his cinematic vision of Godzilla.
In fact, I don't think I'd ever shelled over that kind of money for a film in theaters before. But to me, Godzilla was worth it.
And it was just it had amazing sound. It was the perfect way to see a spectacle like this.
But the problem is that they went out of their way to hide the fact that there were other monsters in the movie, and it made it seem like this is going to be a straight-up remake of the original Gojira.
The doors closing in as the Muto attacks Godzilla at a distance, and you just kind of see it, and where it just kind of shuts. Which in the trailer, I don't know if any of you remember this, but it was just Godzilla roaring in the distance, and it really kind of set a terrorizing tone of what this movie was supposed to be, or you thought it was supposed to be. And I really got to give it to the marketing team on this one, because they really sold this movie as one thing, and it came out as something completely unexpected.
And I'm not going to lie, at the time I kind of wished that they had gone that route, because that movie looked amazing. It's just not the movie that we got.
I want to promote positivity here, but I also have to be honest. I didn't love it. I thought it was well shot, and the first act was pretty good, but there wasn't much Godzilla action at all, which is the main criticism of the movie.
The second mistake is that this was a lot of people's first Godzilla movie, which are largely defined in the popular imagination as 90 straight minutes of men in rubber suits smashing each other into cardboard buildings. And this is not what Godzilla movies are. Even the silliest ones spend a lot of time establishing what the threat is and why Godzilla, who is an established character in most of these films, is needed to stop that monster. So drop that misconception as well.
But now that we have Shin Godzilla, I'm actually really happy that this movie is the way that it is.
Now those are the mistakes most people who dislike this movie make. Not all, but most. And the marketing for this film also holds a lot of the blame, since they set the false expectation that this was about Bryan Cranston trying to stop Godzilla, and not about Godzilla stopping an even worse threat.
I think this was the right move considering the direction they were taking the Legendary series.
So what we have here is essentially a late Showa-era Godzilla movie reimagined through a Spielbergian lens for a modern American audience.
I actually think this one gets better with each rewatch.
Some of the terminology is dumb, aka mutos, but overall, I love the callbacks that I finally get.
Once you're in the right headspace, this is a great Godzilla movie. Part of getting into the right headspace is having the right background info and understanding what kind of story is being told. Outside of the late Showa era, the best example for this sort of storytelling are ancient stories of heroes and saints. Let me explain. Once upon a time, there was a butcher, and it was a time of famine. When he caught some kids stealing what little he had, he killed them. Horrified at what he'd done, he sealed them in a pickle barrel. Now it just so happened that St. Nicholas of Myra was in town. He was a bishop and was told that some children were missing. After some quick detective work, he tracked them down to the butcher's shop. and raise them alive and well from the pickle barrel. The end. Once upon a different time, a farmer's cart got its wheel stuck in the road, and he was unable to move it. And then Hercules showed up and pulled the cart free. The end again. This is that kind of story, except substitute Godzilla in for Hercules or St. Nicholas. Now that we're all on the same page, I think this movie is fantastic. It feels like a Spielberg movie in all the best ways, and feels like a Godzilla movie in all the best ways.
Godzilla looks exactly how he should look.
My favorite monster in this is Gojira, Godzilla.
Godzilla is a chunky boy.
A big scary lizard.
I love this new design of Godzilla.
He's huge.
Especially with the gills, it just makes so much sense.
The thing is, this movie shows he has gills and can breathe air. How much water is he bringing in every gulp? Is this like a whale thing, like 100,000 gallons each time he sips?
Unlike the 98 Godzilla, this version stays very true to the original design.
I love Godzilla's design, which kind of feels traditional while making some adjustments here and there. I actually remember reading that they patterned his face from a bear, which kind of feels ridiculous, but it's kind of true and it does work.
This is also the largest live-action Godzilla ever portrayed, so for once the Americans make it a decent big one. And he only has 11 minutes of screen time.
But somehow manages to improve on it.
He's huge.
Very cool. Shows up, beats up on monsters, and then leaves.
All in all, this movie's really good.
So I'm going to say, I'm a big fan of the MonsterVerse series. It helps that I've seen a couple of Kaiju movies now, including the first Kong and the first Godzilla. So I do love the callbacks to things like, I don't know, Dr. Serizawa. I also appreciated the lore in this film.
So right off the bat, I was super into this because the opening credits showed Godzilla, and it was clear that the U.S. military in World War II-ish era had tried to kill Godzilla with bombs.
I love the idea that the H-bomb tests were just cover stories, that they were trying to kill them or kill Godzilla. I felt like it added an interesting wrinkle to the story, just some layers that we hadn't really seen.
That was nuts.
That we tried to nuke Zilla in the 1950s.
I'm sort of wondering if this almost kind of seems like the original Gojira from 1954 is kind of loose canon.
And the credits show all sorts of that kind of stuff as well.
That was a super cool reveal right from the start.
It was well done.
And given that the movie is called Godzilla, and I know it's a bit notorious for featuring Godzilla for only 12 or so minutes during the movie's running time, which, in all honesty, is right almost on the average amount of screen time that Godzilla has in any of the 30 or so Godzilla movies out there. So it's not that big of a deal to me personally, but I do understand the criticism that the movie focuses too heavily on the Muto adversaries early on rather than Godzilla himself.
The use of scale throughout is incredible.
Although when we are properly introduced to Godzilla, I think it's worth the wait. The sense of scale, going back to that, I'm going to go back to that time and time again, is done so well. There's just so much weight to Godzilla, and I don't mean just in that he's a little bit chunky compared to previous versions, but the sense of scale is phenomenal, and Godzilla moves with real weight and purpose throughout the movie. He doesn't feel like just some cheap digital creation. There's a sense of majesty to every appearance that he makes throughout the movie.
We get this explanation that there's this spot in the Philippines where they've discovered a ton of uranium, and man just goes nuts. All these humans start dumping a ton of resources into trying to get to this uranium that they think they've detected because they detected radiation levels. But when they send in all the heavy equipment and stuff without surveying the land properly, it caves in. And underneath it, they find alien-looking stuff. I mean, it's not alien, it's just ancient. But anyway, we cut from there to Japan.
I like how we start with the 1999 power plant incident.
I love the late 90s cars in Japan. They were super retro. Almost reminded me of Shenmue.
Where Bryan Cranston works at a nuclear facility and is detecting weird seismic activity, and his wife goes down into the guts of the nuclear... I don't know how nuclear reactors work, but she goes down there.
That opening scene where Joe basically has to watch his wife die is already heartbreaking enough, but Cranston's performance really, really sells it.
She ends up not making it out before they have to shut the thing off. She's killed by the radiation.
My wife hated it because we lost Joe's wife, and Ford Mom dies in 10 minutes into the film.
This whole sequence is really heartbreaking.
She thinks this is the second time I've ambushed her with some tragedy. And because a podcaster is a symbol, she personally blames y'all for it on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Just a heads up. She also hates that Joe died later on too. Spoiler alert.
And it was clever that the first act of this movie was set in Japan.
They have to evacuate the whole area, and boom, we cut 15 years later. And immediately I start trying to put pieces together. I'm like, all right, here's what I think happened is they sent all this heavy machinery to where they detected radiation, and they thought it was uranium, but in actuality what they were detecting was Godzilla, and then Godzilla left and for some reason went from where he was in the Philippines up to Japan to hang out at this nuclear power plant. Okay, cool. That makes sense so far.
We jump ahead 15 years later.
We meet Ford, who is Bryan Cranston's son.
And there are some solid performers in here. Obviously, I have to mention the Quicksilver Scarlet Witch team of Elizabeth Olsen and Aaron Taylor Johnson.
And I know that he and Elizabeth Olsen, who played his wife, get a lot of flack for being uninteresting, but I don't blame them.
Who's played by the guy who played Quicksilver. We meet his wife, who is the lady who plays Wanda.
And yes, it makes me very uncomfortable that they play husband and wife in this, and then brother and sister the next year.
So that's weird, because in this movie, they're husband and wife, and then in Age of Ultron, which came out the year after, they're twins.
It's weird. I don't like that, but I guess if that's what it took to get them in those superhero roles, hey, I'm not gonna complain too much about it.
Whatever, that's fine.
I mean, they're both capable actors. Hell, Elizabeth Olsen has proven that even more so now in WandaVision. It's just the material really doesn't give them a lot to do.
And he's just come home from the military and immediately has to leave again because his dad's been arrested in Japan.
But what human characters do you truly remember from these films? Honestly, outside of Dr. Serizawa from the original, or maybe like Miki Sagusa from the Heisei era? When I hear this complaint, this is kind of my question.
And we find out that Bryan Cranston has become obsessed with this area that's completely shut off because of radioactivity, and he convinces his son to go into this radioactive area with him, and it's not radioactive. What the hell?
We see a deserted city straight out of The Last of Us.
From there, he's just trying to uncover the truth about the incident that caused her death, which he does amazingly.
Breaking Bad is studying echolocation for plot purposes.
The goofiest moment is actually the face Bryan Cranston makes when he takes off his gas mask in the quarantine zone.
I do like that Bryan Cranston is kind of the Raymond Burr in this one. He is really just there to spout dialogue.
I did appreciate that Joe spoke fluent Japanese, and didn't dumb down any of his scenes with subtitles, or at least not in my copy.
I think that was a nice touch.
So then we go and we find out that there's this big conspiracy where all these people are working around what looks like a big claw sticking out of the ground. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the size of Godzilla's claws in this movie? That's crazy. I can't wait to see what Bryan Cranston does to deal with it.
Just like with the other two Godzillas we reviewed, this one does a really solid job of building up tension and not revealing the monster right away.
My least favorite monster is actually the cocoon.
Or monsters, I should say.
And then the claw starts cracking open, and it turns out it's not Godzilla.
It just sort of is menacing and glowing.
There's an electromagnetic pulse.
It doesn't really do much else.
It's some other monster. It's a different kaiju.
In fact, there's a couple fake outs where you think the Mutos are Godzilla.
I don't think the Mutos are a very interesting monster.
So, yeah, that's probably my least favorite monster.
And we get our first glimpse at this movie's real adversary, the Mutos.
They end up calling it a Muto later on, but I'm immediately like, what the hell? Obviously Godzilla's still going to show up in this movie, and we saw him in the opening credits, but my mind is blown that we're dealing with a different monster here.
When you have such a catalog and you could really restart Godzilla, you want to give him a strong adversary. This movie just doesn't.
I don't know, like myself and anybody else, we kind of want to see a classic kaiju in this film, but I kind of feel like the creation of something new kind of works in this instance, and it keeps the focus a little bit more on Godzilla. So instead of creating Godzilla versus whomever, we're just focused on Godzilla fighting, hey, there's a new threat, and we got to see what that is. Plus, Toho wants that money, for rights usage, there's no telling how much. I'm sure it's posted on the internet somewhere how much they paid for the next film, but Toho wants their cut. And, this film was kind of on a budget. Although I can't imagine the fee to use Kamacuras would be the same as using King Ghidorah, but what do I know?
And I actually do like the Muto designs. They might remind me a little bit too much of the arachnids in Starship Troopers, but I think there's an animalistic nature that is conveyed well through their movements and their behavior throughout the movie that I think works really well in the sense that they're not necessarily malicious towards humanity.
But I'm not saying the Mutos aren't an interesting creation. They're very much rooted in animal behaviors, which I kind of felt like added a little bit of interesting familiarity and depth to the creatures.
They cause a lot of trouble while trying to protect their young and trying to mate, but they're just trying to survive and they're trying to protect their offspring. So I think there's a little bit, in a sense, Godzilla is more the meaner monster that he just wants to chomp on these bugs, but they're just trying to survive. As for the human characters, my favorite is definitely Joe Brody, played by Bryan Cranston, who brings an awful lot of humanity to a very small, notoriously small role.
Bryan Cranston's a treat.
And then Bryan Cranston just dies.
I think another one of the big ones is Bryan Cranston.
I think his character works really well, and I like the rapport between him and Aaron Taylor Johnson.
He's like the star of the movie, and he really could have brought it. But, spoiler alert, he's not in it very much, for reasons that are apparent if you've seen the film.
Sure, they probably should have given Bryan Cranston a bigger role in the movie, especially with people's reactions to him in the trailer.
Though I understand why he had to die.
But at the same time, that might have taken away from the main star of the show, Godzilla himself.
Otherwise he'd be competing against Serizawa for the crazy idea scientist.
And look, as much as I did hate his character dying when he did, I honestly felt like his arc had been completed.
I think that would have been interesting to see stretched out over the entire movie, but at the same time, it wouldn't have had any emotional weight if his character had just been there the entire time. I think it might have turned out to make him as dull as a lot of the other characters in the movie.
Like 45 minutes into this movie, that one of the two things I knew about it was that it was the Bryan Cranston Godzilla movie, and now he's dead 45 minutes in.
And that's really a shame, because the rest of the human cast is just, they're not giving their all.
Like, he found the answers he was searching for, and I'm not really sure where you take his character from there. Which is why we then get to follow his son, Ford, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, mainly because he's a soldier and, it's soldiering time.
And my mind is blown. I don't know what the hell's going to happen now.
We meet Dr. Serizawa.
Additionally, Bryan Cranston is the most interesting person in this movie as a human character. Although I do love Ken Watanabe as Dr. Serizawa, he captures a lot of my own feelings toward what happens in this movie.
Speaking of Dr. Serizawa, he is played here by Ken Watanabe, and not in the same aspect as the original film, but more here for a character for the sake of exposition and letting us know where Godzilla comes from, what are the monsters, all these things that we need to know. He's there to explain that, and I'm kind of okay with that.
I like this scene where he shows off his grandfather's pocket watch from Hiroshima.
But then they're like, there's this other thing, the apex predator, we call it Godzilla. We're pretty sure that it is like nature's way of restoring balance or something. Dr. Serizawa says this, cool that Dr. Serizawa's back, Dr. Eye Patch from the original Godzilla movie.
Like, is this the grandson of the original Dr. Serizawa? The scientist with the eye patch?
He doesn't fulfill anywhere near the same role in this that he did in the original movie.
Because he makes you believe every fantastical element. And through him, we're introduced to Monarch, which becomes more important later on.
So him sharing the same name as that character seems more like an Easter egg than, like, narratively impactful, but this is fine, whatever.
Really dug a lot of the visuals in this film, a lot of the cinematography and composition that they did.
I just wish there wasn't such a focus on these soldier characters who are absolutely bland.
And we get a ton of explanation that the Monarch organization has existed since the 50s to study these giant monsters, which is like, it's that thing where this is way too big of a conspiracy for it to actually be kept quiet, but whatever, it works. They end up dropping Ford off in Hawaii so that he can catch a ride home.
A lot of people give Aaron Taylor Johnson a lot of crap.
And the human stuff there is fine.
A lot of people are critical of Aaron Taylor Johnson's performance in this movie. I think he does really well.
But I actually think he does a really good job in this movie.
Ford is not my favorite character.
I know a lot of veterans. Many of them, the ones who seem to have made the best adjustment to civilian life, have what I kind of call soldier mode. Like, they act like normal people until they're in a serious situation, and then they just kind of go blank, like they're operating on muscle memory. And I think that's what he's doing here.
On that point, I don't have much of a problem with the human drama in the movie. I think it's appropriate for what the movie is. It's not as much fun as some of the campy alien invasion storylines in the Showa-era Godzilla movies, but I do think the main character's struggle to get back to his family while also doing his military duty and preventing Godzilla from causing destruction in San Francisco. It's a relatable, very simple storyline for that character. And
we live near San Antonio, which is it's called Military City, USA. You know, there's a lot of military bases, Air Force and Army, and we see military people a lot, and they definitely, it seems, turn this on and off based on the situation they're in.
The problem I have is that the supporting cast is so good, and they're given so little to work with. You have great actors like Sally Hawkins and David Strathairn, who just are kind of there. They're admirable in their attempt to bring something to such small roles, but when all is said and done, it could have been anybody in those roles, and then they didn't really need to get these Oscar-worthy, Oscar-nominated actors for those small roles.
I think he's portraying a soldier realistically. You see him in the scenes when he's home or when he's with his dad, and he's a person. He's talking and feeling. And when he is working as a soldier, you see like this disconnect. He's in work mode. You see this disconnect between who he is personally in his home life and who he is at work. And a lot of us have this, work persona and home persona. It doesn't mean anything but that, and I think that's a very realistic portrayal.
There's a part where he saves a kid at the airport in Hawaii. That's like a good character moment that shows that like he's willing to be selfless because he's like helping this kid, and then the kid finds his parents and he doesn't even go over to be like, hey, high five, I saved your kid. He's just like, I did the right thing. But we don't need that because he also has the selfish goal of saving San Francisco because his wife and child are there. So it's weird that they put that in.
He's the audience in. He's the POV character. And he does a lot of his acting without dialogue.
And then the Muto shows up at Hawaii.
The design of the Mutos are pretty fun. They were kind of like alien-ish, insect-ish, little reptile. They had almost like a metallic or like a designed robot head, but they could have come from nature. The
military is trying to fight against the Muto, and then Godzilla shows up and like comes up on the shore, which is super cool.
The whole Hawaii sequence is great.
The goofiest moment in the movie, I believe, is when the dog is running away from Godzilla's tidal wave when he first appears on land. It reminds me an awful lot of Roland Emmerich's Independence Day, and as we all know, Roland Emmerich made the critical failure that is the 1998 American Godzilla movie, so it's a little bit ironic, I guess, that there's something in this that reminds me so much of that movie, but I just don't really understand why we're following a dog when there's all these people who are obviously dying. Maybe that was the point, is to distract you from the fact that there's innocent people drowning left and right, but we're supposed to be concerned with the dog's safety for whatever reason. It's goofy. It doesn't really fit with the movie's tone. Yeah, I could have done without that.
And then, some fights there.
There's also some really great shots here and there where you get a little glimpse of the Big G before his full reveal.
My favorite moment to him is the reveal in Hawaii, and you see this giant leg stomp down. This thing is wide as hell.
Probably one of the coolest moments in the whole film is the first real sort of fight scene between Godzilla and the Muto.
The scene on the tram was intense. This felt like a ride.
Where the train is passing underneath the Muto and like helicopters are shooting at it and Godzilla just sort of steps into frame.
Godzilla's airport entrance where you just kind of see his foot through the window pane of the airport.
That Godzilla reveal was awesome, with his foot stomping down, the massive explosions.
And we get our first, like, kaiju fight.
Finally, we got Godzilla and the Mutos.
I know a lot of people complain that we cut away and then we only see him in the background on TV, but I kind of like that. I thought that was kind of clever. Once again, less is more.
All of my favorite Godzilla things are kind of steered away from.
The other big concern a lot of people have is the fight scenes, how after that marvelous introduction of Godzilla at the airport in Hawaii, we cut away. I think that's brilliant. This follows kind of the structure of a lot of the late Showa Godzilla movies.
Godzilla's pretty agile for what he is, though, and he's pretty smart. But like I mentioned before, he doesn't give a crap about us. He's all about the balance. Other large monsters? No, though they have to go.
And then it just sort of cuts away. I thought that was very good.
Once again, just like the shark from Jaws, less is more.
Meanwhile, they figured out that, holy smack, Bryan Cranston was right. The Muto was communicating with someone, and there was actually 2 spores at that original facility, or that original cave in the Philippines, and one spore, like, hatched and went to live in Japan. The other spore they thought was inert, and they took it to the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository, which you can learn more about by listening to Epic Fails of History over on probablywork.com. That's Epic with a K.
Also, as someone who used to live in Vegas, I was really excited at the prospect of Godzilla rampaging through Las Vegas, but spoilers, that doesn't actually happen. It turns out that was just one of the Mutos.
The destruction of Vegas is awesome because we don't see it happen. We see that the thing's approaching, Vegas starts shaking, and then we see some firefighters that are like, I guess, trying to evacuate a building or something, and they run through a doorway, and the side of the hotel is just gone, and you just see like just a straight line carved straight through Vegas where this thing just marched through.
And unfortunately, it basically happens off screen, which made me sad.
The scene where they're looking through the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository is dumb because they're like going chamber to chamber, opening like view slats to look into the chamber and make sure nothing's in there. And then they open one, just blinding light comes through. And it's because it turns out that this thing is like a 300-foot tall Muto, which I guess it hatched out of the spore and then fed on all the nuclear waste there and got real big real fast. But it just blew out the side of the mountain. Why did they have to send people in to the mountain to look around for this when the thing blew out the side of a mountain and is 300 feet tall? You'd think they would have seen it.
Still, those shots are pretty great.
This film has the story structure of a late Showa era Godzilla movie. Godzilla is established. We don't go into what is Godzilla too much. You do a little bit, but the filmmakers assume that we as an audience are aware of Godzilla, which we are. I mean, that's why we're here. That's why we should be here.
This is where things get a little fuzzy for me, because they figured out that the 2 Mutos are trying to mate, and that Godzilla is hunting them.
The whole sequence on the Golden Gate Bridge is spectacular. It's pretty crazy how real all of this looks.
And so they have this plan where they're going to take a nuclear warhead and put it off the coast of San Francisco in order to attract the Mutos there, and they want to get all 3 of them together and then blow it up.
The analog mechanical nukes are really clever.
But then that just doesn't happen. Like, the Muto, the original one gets to San Francisco right after Godzilla does, which is weird because Godzilla was following the Muto, and then the Muto, I guess it's there before they're ready, and so it just takes the warhead off the boat, and they go and start mating in the middle of San Francisco. I'm unclear why their plan failed. It seems like they had a long time to get their idea together, and then it just went, but it didn't work.
Obviously, this movie is so much better than the 1998 Godzilla, but that's probably the only Godzilla movie I think this is better than, which is not a good sign.
My favorite line is from Dr. Serizawa, who's actually my favorite character in this film.
And for some reason, he thinks that Godzilla is like to restore balance. And so he's like, oh man, Godzilla's going to track this thing down.
Godzilla is an alpha predator. He's hunting.
It's nature has an order, a power to restore balance. I believe he is that power. And he is referencing Gojira in that moment.
I mean, he does a very capable job. He's probably the only other character in the movie that's kind of interesting.
As a Godzilla fan, I am in awe of Godzilla the whole time the way he is. And he's more my perspective character than Ford Brody.
And let's not forget, without him, we wouldn't have the iconic line, "Let them fight." And if the film is remembered for anything, it's this.
My favorite line in the movie is Dr. Serizawa saying, "Let them fight." That has become a bit of an internet meme over the years, and rightfully so.
Let them fight.
It's a great whoever loses, we win sort of moment in the movie.
Let them fight.
The end of the movie was a little disappointing to me because basically you have two things going on. You have Godzilla and the Mutos actually fighting. You have your big kaiju fight happening.
I like that the Mutos set up their nest in the middle of Chinatown in San Francisco.
Actually, thinking about it, the fact that the eggs were found in a creature similar to Godzilla, and eggs were laid near or in a food source, it probably means that the Godzilla creature is made up of pure radiation and like sinew, like moving cancer that breathes fire.
And then down on the ground, you have Ford and a bunch of other soldiers who are trying to either disable the bomb that they've got in the middle of San Francisco so it doesn't blow up San Francisco, or get it onto a boat and out of San Francisco.
Runner-up favorite sequence is the Halo jump, which was famously used for the teaser trailer for the movie, and I think that was a great way to show off the movie and show the exact sort of sense of scale that they're going for with this Godzilla.
This whole Halo jump sequence still gives me chills.
And it's just so awesome to see these tiny little people skydiving around Godzilla with this eerie score. I believe it's from 2001: A Space Odyssey, the music. And it fits so perfectly with this kind of gloomy atmosphere. It has a very apocalyptic feel.
The skydiving sequence, which I feel like is pretty iconic now. You can kind of see all the fighting going on through the clouds and the lights flashing.
It's just perfect. It's the perfect way to show off the legendary version of Godzilla.
I like the actor Aaron Johnson as Ford, though my wife pointed out that most EOD probably wouldn't also be trained as a Halo jumper, especially because he's Navy.
I remember in the original teaser trailer, it was basically just this sequence, and I still love every second of it.
And look, as far as the fights go, I admit I got a little bit frustrated by that second fight cutaway when you see Godzilla being attacked that I just mentioned, because I was ready for a throwdown and we'd gotten 2 cutaways and scenes from a distance. But as I said, this was a Godzilla film on a budget, so the monster action had to be a tad light.
But anyway, Ford isn't my favorite character, so I don't really care about the human stuff that's going on. I mean, obviously, don't blow up San Francisco if you can help it. That's always a good plan, but whatever. I'm more interested in the kaiju fight.
I like that the male Muto could fly, but also had that EMP strike. And the female was more like a queen termite or something. I didn't understand the sphere of influence they kept harping on that she had, though, because it kind of got turned on and off at the director's discretion. I mean, it's like 2 miles wide or like 1/8 of a mile wide. It's like a bubble around her. Sometimes didn't work.
On the same token, I can kind of appreciate the tactic because when we finally get a fight, I was ready for it and I was all in.
And the problem is, it's too dark. Throughout this movie, it's been way too dark. And like, I get that some of that is made to build suspense, but it gets way too dark because the Muto has an EMP, so it just knocks out all the power, and then it's literally black as night, and all the cool action happens at night.
I've watched most of the old Toho Godzilla movies, and I gotta say, this is the best kaiju fight to date.
So I couldn't see anything in this big kaiju fight at the end, until I turned the brightness way up on my TV, and then it looked all gray and grainy and washed out, but I could at least see the big monsters punching each other, and it was pretty cool.
The use of scale in this movie is incredible, and probably the best yet of any giant monster movie.
This isn't a bad movie, it's a good-looking movie.
I really like this film despite feeling very frustrated for the same reasons many other Godzilla fans did too. A lack of monster fights.
The director has an insane sense of scale, and that's really showcased in Rogue One, obviously. I think Rogue One is a much better movie than this is. But both of these movies look impeccable.
And when I heard Gareth Edwards had come aboard to direct, I didn't know how I felt about it. I'd heard the praise about his breakout film, aptly named Monsters, and I decided to give it a watch to see what kind of filmmaker we were dealing with here. The film was good, and it brought a different approach to the genre, which I kind of liked. Seeing his serious approach to the subject matter made me hopeful that he could do it justice.
Gareth Edwards does an awesome job with the cinematography and effects, really playing up the environments and use of lighting.
Another thing a lot of people complain about is the score. They say they would have liked more classic Godzilla music. And we get that in King of the Monsters, and I love how it's used there. However, there are so many references to classic Godzilla scores, including the piece called Godzilla's Victory, ends with this fanfare that is an exact reversal of the fanfare that ends the main title theme from the second ever Godzilla movie, Godzilla Raids Again.
The movie actually took some audio cues and music from Godzilla vs. Hedorah, aka The Smog Monster, which was a terrible movie that we released as a bonus episode to this series.
And there are lots of callbacks like that throughout the score. A lot more subtle for the most part, and I really enjoy that.
But for me, it's a minor gripe in a very solid flick, and I think many of the complaints kind of undercut the idea of those purposeful choices. Throughout all the promotional material, we never once saw Godzilla's atomic breath.
The cheesiest part of the big monster fight is when Godzilla charges up his nuclear blast. Nuclear breath? I don't know what that attack's called, but he charges up and his little spike on the end of his tail starts glowing, and then the glows go all the way up his spines up to his head.
I cried in the theater as the Big G's tail plates illuminated the first time.
But as soon as his tail began to light up, I audibly vocalized in the theater, "Oh, the shit is on now."
And he blasted that deadly breath at one of the Mutos.
And then he shoots out a nuclear blast.
And cheered through the whole fight.
Godzilla was being Godzilla, and that's all I wanted.
My favorite moment by far is Godzilla's kiss of death, as it's become known.
The coolest moment of the movie is, of course, when Godzilla does defeat the monster. I remember when I saw that. I must have been 10 years old when this movie came out, but when I saw that happen, it was great. That's the Godzilla I wanted.
The second best moment after the first showing of Godzilla is a part where he breathes nuclear fire down the throat of the female Muto.
And then later he does it to the other Muto and shoots it down its throat.
He blows atomic breath down his throat and then tears his head off. That's better than how the best Godzilla movies end a lot of the time.
The way that he finishes off the second Muto by wrenching open its jaws and using his atomic breath inside its mouth to just blast its head off.
That's an incredible moment, and you best believe I've YouTubed that shit a lot.
It's brutal.
It's such a fun finishing move. One of the most memorable in any Godzilla movie. I love it so much, and there's a reason that moment's kind of famous amongst Godzilla fans.
It was a great moment. You want some radiation? Sure, bitch. I'll give you all the radiation you want. Eat this.
As someone who already loves Godzilla and has for their whole life, the way this movie builds its tension, only to release it all like so much atomic breath down another monster's throat, is perfect.
But it doesn't really make up for what I think is just a pretty boring, generic movie, unfortunately.
The part where the building collapses on top of Godzilla is so dramatic. Poor Godzilla.
And then Godzilla dies and the movie ends. And then the movie keeps going.
I think that Elizabeth Olsen's a fantastic actress, and I also thought she was great in her role, even if she didn't do anything.
The movie is very much about the human characters, and for the most part they do a good job of really giving you a ground perspective of what's going on, and what it would be like if there really was a kaiju battle going on around you.
That's the thing with this movie. It's full of great character actors, but this movie isn't about what the humans did. The humans did nothing.
And we have to see Ford getting reunited with his wife and child. Great, cool, that's fine, whatever. But then Godzilla stands back up again. Turns out he wasn't dead. He was just taking a nap, because if Godzilla is anything, he's a sleepy dino.
I will say, though, the ending kind of bugs me.
And he gets up from his nap and walks back out into the ocean and dives underwater and goes away, which is great.
Because even though Godzilla saved the day, people should still be terrified of him.
But while he's doing that, a news report is showing him walking through the destruction of San Francisco and says, "King of the Monsters, the savior of our city?" ? And that's freaking stupid.
Instead, they're cheering him on, and
How? What?
I don't really know if that's earned.
How did these...
It felt a little off to me.
How would these people know anything about this being the savior of their city? As far as they know, 3 giant monsters showed up and wrecked shit all over San Francisco. Why would they think that this one's a good one? Like, I get that Dr. Serizawa thought that, and I guess that all Godzilla's motivation was in this movie was like, Godzilla was taking a nap and then woke up because he heard the Muto and was like, screw that, we can't have Mutos around, and he wanted to kill the Muto, and now that he did, he's going to go back into hibernation, maybe.
Godzilla's obviously a little bit less of a threat to humanity than the Mutos. He puts on his kid gloves when he's around human beings, and I think that's kind of hilarious.
So let's take Godzilla vs. Megalon, which is one of the Godzilla movies most Americans had seen until present. Its story structure is we establish that there's something happening with an underground civilization that is affecting the people on Earth above ground. Because we've been still testing nukes, these people who live underground are furious. Their name is Seatopia, by the way. They're from Seatopia, and they're ruled by Emperor Antonio, who is a very hairy Robert Durham. Anyway, the Seatopians send a monster who attacks Tokyo, and so this guy named Goro sends his robot, Jet Jaguar, to get Godzilla to fight Megalon. So Godzilla is an outside force acting on the story, much like the stories of saints and heroes that I referred to earlier. Godzilla is the hero in this traditional structure. He's the one who comes in and does the fighting and solves the problem, but he's not the protagonist from a story point of view. And that is what makes this movie work in the larger context of a Godzilla movie.
Sometimes I appreciate that take on Godzilla, that he's going out of his way to protect people, or at least not hurt them himself. And at other times it looks a little silly when he very consciously threads the needle, so to speak, to avoid hurting any human being needlessly.
But, like, he's not a hero. He doesn't care about humans. I think that's the biggest thing to me, is like, Godzilla is a force of nature that just happens. He doesn't give a shit about humanity. And for the newscasters to call him the savior of our city is the stupidest thing I've seen.
It's really my only major complaint about this movie.
That's stupider than the oxygen-destroying bomb or whatever from the first movie.
What we're talking about is a story that tells how extraordinary figures influence the everyday people around them, with an emphasis on the everyday people.
And I love how they said that Godzilla literally is a god. Honestly, it's proven. Because no matter what humans do, Godzilla just did what he needed to do. Neil Muto would have still have eaten all the reactor over the course of 15 years, and Godzilla still would have had to shown up. Even if we found out that we didn't nuke Zilla with anything less than a super megaton warhead, and probably not even then.
I don't really have a least favorite human character other than the whole organization of Monarch.
Seriously, the only thing that humans did that affected the outcome of the movie is that Monarch took the female Muto egg to the Nevada nuclear storage area. If it had stayed in the Philippines, Godzilla would have stomped some serious ass in Asia instead. All we did was feed Mama.
They kind of fail at doing their job.
Now sure, Ford ended up killing the eggs, but you're going to tell me that Godzilla wouldn't have noticed them and taken them out?
And a lot of people seem to die because of that.
Also, with the amount of naked gamma radiation going on, I mean, wasn't the male Muto just chomping down on some torpedoes and there were just so much bombs? There's a ton of people with cancer now. Forget San Francisco being destroyed. We destroyed a generation to the levels of COVID.
So most of the great Godzilla movies are really about something, and I think this movie's no different.
American Godzilla will never feel genuine or right to me. I don't think we'll ever get it because Toho just has this magic that they've captured, and they always get people in who understand the characters and who aren't afraid to make it a little ridiculous.
Ultimately, I think this movie is actually about global warming. The Mutos were a result of man's hubris. They're a global threat. It's a situation that's completely out of our hands at this point. We caused it, and Godzilla is Mother Nature's destructive answer to set things right. It's a metaphor for balance with nature, and I think it works.
So yeah, that's Godzilla. I thought the very end with the savior of our city was stupid, and I thought it was too dark, and I didn't give a shit about Ford. Those are my only complaints, though. Otherwise, I love this movie. This is my favorite one we've watched so far, by far.
It doesn't really feel more like a Godzilla movie than the 90s one. Obviously, that movie is very bad for countless reasons. At least that has some wacky monster action. I remember that one infinitely more than I remember the 2014 one. I really wish I liked it, guys. I really do.
I thought it was great. I thought it had cool action. It was intense. It had interesting plot points. Like, I was surprised by the appearance of the Muto. I was surprised by the death of Bryan Cranston. I still can't get over it.
Add to the fact that he was actually portrayed as a hero and not just another monster that needed to be put down. It was another amazing misdirect. And it really set the stage for the franchise.
I just don't have many compliments for this movie, other than the ending and how menacing Godzilla truly is, mostly through camera work. I think that's wonderful. But everything else is just, it's a total miss for me. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll watch it again and really like it before Godzilla vs. Kong comes out. I just don't really know about this one.
And look, I get why some people don't get this film, because they want full-blown action, intense monster brawls. They want nothing but just loud noise and just explosions and punches, and that's fine. I enjoy that every now and again myself. But this one is meant to be a slow burn, like Gojira or even Shin Godzilla afterwards.
To me, this cutting away at the fights up to the final fight, which is completely interwoven with the human action, emphasizes that this is how the story should be told. It's outside forces acting upon a small drama.
I can appreciate the build-up, and I think that this is something that's being lost in today's instant culture society.
And it's perfect. This movie is pretty much perfect. It takes itself a little too seriously, and that's really the only flaw I would say it has. This is the American Godzilla movie I wanted in 1998, and I'm so glad I finally got it.
My favorite bit of trivia for the movie is that it actually, the project started shortly after Godzilla Final Wars bombed in theaters in 2004, and the director of the 70s movie Godzilla vs. Hedorah, which is one of the stranger Godzilla movies, it wasn't very well received at the time, especially by Toho executives. So it's interesting that the director of that movie, Yoshimitsu Banno, was able to procure the rights from Toho to the Godzilla series and was allowed to make a contract with Western studios for a new Godzilla movie, and it was planned to be a sequel to Godzilla vs. Hedorah, in which Godzilla would go to South America and fight another monster made out of pollution, different from Hedorah this time, and probably for the best that did not pan out all that well, although Yoshimitsu Banno remained on board as an executive producer for the legendary / Warner Brothers Godzilla, and it's a bit of a good redemption arc for him, since he received a lot of flack from Toho for making Godzilla vs. Hedorah at the time. They thought he ruined the entire series. Obviously, that wasn't the case. They made several more movies in the Showa era before taking a hiatus, and Godzilla has stuck around, and yeah, good for him. He stuck with it and ended up having his name attached to one of the most successful Godzilla movies. That being said, I look forward to seeing him causing wanton destruction in Godzilla vs. Kong in just a few weeks.
And I'm not so sure we ought to be talking about the Kong versus Godzilla fight right now, or Godzilla versus Kong, because we're about to get that fight in a few weeks.
Let them fight.
This is the legendary Godzilla.
And as for the upcoming Godzilla vs. Kong, I am still rooting for Godzilla to win, because I really don't want him to lose to King Kong twice in a row.
Not the legendary Godzilla, but you know what I mean.
After watching this movie, the giant nuclear walking furnace still wins.
I love King Kong and all, but it'd be nice to see them have a 50% victory ratio.
Let them fight.
We're going to see the fight in a couple of weeks. Just hang tight, people.
Not even a competition.
We already know who's going to win.
What, did Kong come up to his knee or something?
Let them fight.
Kong wins.
And yeah, those are my thoughts on 2014's Godzilla. It's a movie that I really enjoy. I think it has some amazing cinematography, especially some of the shots of Godzilla getting ready to square off against the Mutos late in the movie, I think are fantastic. That entire fight sequence between the monsters is one of my favorites in the entire series. I think it's so well done, and it's absolutely worth the wait. If you're patient, you can appreciate some pretty images along the way, and it's just such a blast at the end, literally and figuratively.
They killed Bryan Cranston 45 minutes into the Bryan Cranston Godzilla movie.
All in all, this is a really solid start to the Legendary Pictures MonsterVerse series.
I loved it. I can't wait to see more. What's next? Kong Skull Island is next. Another Kong movie. I hope this one's different. I mean, you know, we've watched 3 Godzilla movies so far that have each been pretty different. We've watched 2 King Kong movies, and it's just been the same movie, so I'm excited to see new King Kong.
And the next one up is actually a prequel. That's right. We're heading back to Skull Island. Again.
Next time on Podcasters Assemble.
Godzilla will return in 2019's Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and King Kong will return in Kong, Skull Island.
These are photos of an island in the South Pacific.
The place where myth and science meet.
We use explosives to shake the earth, helping us to map the surface of the island. They're dropping bombs. Scientific instruments.
Is that a monkey?
Magnificent.
You knew that thing was out here?
I'm sorry for your men, Colonel. But if you want to make their sacrifice worthwhile, get us home with proof. Monsters exist.
Whoa. Your friend there can put that down. What the hell is this place?
That's Kong. He's king around here. Kong's a pretty good king. Keeps to himself mostly. Well, you don't go into someone's house and start dropping bombs unless you're picking a fight. Kong's God on the island, but the devils live below us.
And what are they called?
I call them skull crawlers.
Why?
Never said that name out loud before. It sounds stupid now that I say. Just, you call them whatever you want. It's a good group of boys. We're all gonna die together out here. You shouldn't have come here.
Podcasters Assemble is a production of the We Can Make This Work Probably Podcast Network. Find more of our shows at probablywork.com and learn how to contribute to future episodes of Podcasters Assemble by looking us up on Twitter and Instagram at Casters Assemble or joining on Discord. The link is in the show notes. Submissions are always open. Thank you to everyone who's able to contribute to this episode. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to where you can find them all online. Thank you. Oh God, please, thank you.
Music produced by Deft Stroke Sound. Opening narration written by Eric Slater and performed by Justin Aki. This episode was edited by Eric Slater.
This has been a presentation of the We Can Make This Work
Probably Network.
Follow us on Twitter
at ProbablyWork
for more of our questionable content.
Also, we have a website called probablywork.com.
As the first the
Podcasters Assemble.
Let them fight.